Good afternoon, everyone. It's Gary Sly in the Legacy of Handmade Objects. It's Monday afternoon, November the 17th. A little bit past 3 o'clock, I can hear the church bells ringing across the street. Starting to see folks coming in, looking around for ideas for the holidays, for Hanukkah and Christmas and other special occasions during the winter. So my idea today was to talk a little bit about my ideas for the top 10 gifts to give to stitchers. This is very subjective. It's my idea, but it also relates a lot to what I hear and what people are looking for when they come into the shop. This may mean something different. If you're an experienced stitcher, you may have very refined ideas of what you want, but if you have somebody who likes to buy things for you and you're a stitcher and they are clueless, you might have them watch this video. It might give them some ideas. Now, one thing I would say to someone who maybe doesn't know too much about stitching, but who would like to buy something for a friend of theirs who is a stitcher. Two things I would not recommend you buy. I would not recommend you buy a kit or a pattern. Because I think in both cases, if they're anything at all of an experienced stitcher, they have very clear ideas about what they want to spend their time stitching on. And you probably will give them something that they will end up putting away in a drawer somewhere in order to be polite. A friend of mine lives up in North Carolina, texted me last year, and her mother was up in her 90s, and she still stitches, and she wanted me to pick out some patterns and send to her as a gift for her mother. And I said, oh no, you don't want to do that. You want to give her a gift card or something else and let her choose her own, because if she's in her 90s and she's been stitching for many years, she's not going to like what you pick out. And that's the difference between somebody who knows the refinement of a stitcher and those who don't. So without any further ado, let me give some ideas. You may or may not agree with my list, but maybe it'll jog some ideas for you as well. One thing that's very popular and that I see a lot of people buying this time of year as stocking stuffers and things like that are scissors. I guess most stitchers like to have numerous pairs, and some of them are just so cute that you got to have them anyway. This one has gingerbread men on it. And I've had an awful lot of interest in my little kitty cat scissors that I have here. Now, these are both very inexpensive. You can spend anywhere from $5 to $10 all the way up to $100 and more. If you really want a special gift, you find one of those precise Italian pairs of scissors that get so much attention in the stitching world. So number one possible gift would be scissors. Another gift that I realized kind of late in my own career that I use an awful lot are pin cushions. Now, these can be handmade like this one is. This was a cute little napkin holder that this person turned into a pin cushion. I've got all kinds of cute little handmade ones here. There's all kinds of things you can find. But I suspect if you have a stitcher in your life, or if you're looking for an idea for yourself, a needle pin cushion would be a good idea. And since we're talking about needles, another kind of indispensable thing that I never knew I needed, but which now I can hardly live without when I travel, is a needle case. I happen to have a lot of antique ones and some neat ones. You always want to take something like this when you're traveling, because you know as well as I do, if you're traveling and you lose your needle and that's the only one you have, you're going to be in a panic trying to find another one. Look around for some cute ones or ones that have something distinctive that would be significant for the person you're giving the gift to. So number one is scissors, number two, a pin cushion, number three, a needle case. Along the same lines, you might buy some nice needles. These aren't the top of the line needles, but they're John James. They're really good quality. They're the ones I sell the most. And if you're a non-stitcher, you would want somebody in the shop to tell you what kind of needles to get based on what sort of stitching your friend or loved one might do. So needles is another good gift, and that would be number 4 on my list. Finally, I think the last thing I would talk about in terms of implements, and I have some beautiful handmade versions of these, are words sometimes slip out of my head sometimes. Laying tools, for those of you who are very precise with the way that you lay your stitches, and these are particularly valuable for needle pointers, but not always, and seam reppers. And this is a cute little handmade version that I have here that has one on one end and one on the other. And of course, if you're not using them, rather than to puncture yourself, you can put them away, and they end up making this wonderful little case that you can have in your sewing box. So laying tools / seam rippers are good options for stitchers. Maybe if you're not a stitcher, that's not something you'd think about, but they're a lot of fun, and you can probably find some good ones. Something that surprised me, simply because I don't use them very much, but which are very popular in the shop, are project bags. I happen to have a couple of folks who do homemade project bags, and they're an awful lot of fun to have. You've got a big one here, and then they've made this cute little case that goes with it that you could either use for your phone, or this might be where you could put your little scissors and your laying tools and all the other little stuff. And in the larger bag, you might use for your fabric and your pattern and things like that. So project bags, number 6 in the lineup of good ideas and things to think about for the holidays. I would say that if you know the person you're stitching or you're buying for, it's best to have a little bit of an idea of what kind of things they do and what they're interested in. If they're a brand new beginner or somebody who's interested in trying, then you might try a kit. The nice thing about kits for beginners is they're going to come with the right size needle, with the threads and all the things that they need. One thing that I recommend a lot for brand new stitchers are these fun little wooden ornaments made from Canadian stitchery. They are a little ornament with holes in them, made out of wood. They come with all the thread and the needles, and even have a little piece of felt to go on the back so that you can string them up and use them as an ornament. They have an ugly sweater series that's quite fun for the holidays, and I know how much people like ugly sweaters. I wouldn't buy kits necessarily for an experienced stitcher unless you find maybe a symbol or something that you know would attract them. Like, I have a number of stitchers who come in the shop who are way into bees, and probably if you gave one of those folks anything with a bee on it, they would appreciate it. So then you could do patterns or possibly kits. Be careful about kits with experienced stitchers though, because they're going to have really clear ideas about what they want to spend their time working on. You know, you think about it, as many hours as we spend, even though we enjoy it immensely, most of us do not want to stitch things that we don't like. So unless you're doing it for somebody else, I wouldn't go there. Another kind of tricky gift, but one that you could do if you have a little bit of an idea of what kind of a stitcher person is fabric. You can find beautiful, look at this wonderful cherry vanilla 32 count linen from Weeks Dye Works. You can find beautiful fabrics. If you know they use smaller counts, almost anybody would enjoy a fat quarter of this stuff. They might not have a project at hand right now, but I believe if they saw this, they'd start looking around for ideas on what they could stitch. You may have an idea of what kind of colors they like, what kind of color palette they like to use in their stitching. But don't buy an experienced stitcher a roll of cheap Aida cloth if you know that they like linen, or vice versa. Don't buy linen for somebody who really likes larger counts and maybe has a little bit of trouble seeing and wouldn't want to work on these small ones. But fabric is pretty expensive. It's quite a splurge if you give somebody a fat quarter of a really nice piece of linen or something like that. Now, one of my personal favorites is an Ort jar. I keep my orts every year, and on the 4th of July every year, I empty out my ort jar. Sometimes I'll let it go 2 or 3 years in a row and just kind of watch the layers. If you don't know, orts are the little pieces of thread that are cut off when you're stitching and that accumulate, and that if you look at them, you can kind of see what sort of projects you were working on. I sell in the shop these cute little, just kind of generic ort jars, and we have all kinds of little fun holders for them. This is one of my favorites. It's made out of rulers. And this would sit on your stitching table or next to your chair, and as you're taking off those fragments, you would throw them in there, and then they would collect there, and you'd have them for a long time. I think I showed you all my orts last year in July when I took them out. Some people will use those to stuff clear glass ornaments or something like that. Not maybe everybody's thing. Probably a lot of you just throw them away, but it's one of my favorite things to do, because then I can look back over the year and I really can literally see some of the projects that I've been doing, almost like geological layers as I go through the year. Finally, one of the best things to get for an established stitcher, especially if you don't know what they like, is a gift card. We try to support local shops. I know whenever I travel, I try to go to local shops and buy things there, even though I have a shop of my own and probably don't really need anything at all. I like to make sure that our local businesses and small businesses are able to survive. It's been a tough few months, I think, for a lot of us in small business. There's a lot of uncertainty around us in the economy. People are increasingly scared and wary about how to use their money. I've been doing custom framing for well over a decade, and the person that I've been ordering frames from all that time is going out of business at the end of the year, and I'm really not 100% sure what I'm going to do about it, because my options tend to be the larger, more corporate framing companies, and the prices have just gotten so outrageous that I'm kind of embarrassed to be a framer anymore. I spend a lot of time warning people about how expensive framing is when they come into the shop, which doesn't help my sales very much, but I just, giving people a bill of $500 to $600 for framing, when just a few years ago it would have cost a few hundred, is distressing. I mean, it's hard for me in good conscience to do it, but frames in particular have gotten so expensive that it's almost like roulette for me to figure out what a frame is going to cost. I think, the reason I started down this path is that we really do want to try to support those small shops and stitching establishments that are still around, because if they're like the ones that I know of here in Florida, they're probably really kind of wondering how to get through the next few months and on into the new year. Typically, this is a great time of year for us in terms of sales, but you always know that when that's over and you get into the new year, you've got the bills still coming and maybe not quite as much coming in. So support your small business. Spending $50 at one of their shops would mean a whole lot more than pouring it into corporate coffers somewhere. So that's my top 10 ideas for possible Christmas gifts for the stitcher in your life. If I have some time over the next couple of weeks, I'll spend some time looking at what to do for knitters and crocheters and weavers and some of the other folks that you may know as well. This is Gary Sly, and it's the Legacy of Handmade Objects, and I hope you have a great week.